المصطفى أما بعد يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإن تتولوا يستبدل قوما غيركم ثم لا يكونوا أمثالكم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم. Today's topic is a chapter in the history of Islam, but this chapter from the history of Islam is probably the most tragic, the most darkest, and for Muslims, the most bloodiest chapter. But at the same time, it's the most inspiring. It's the most motivating and most inspiring chapter in the history of Islam. How can something so dark, so devastating, be so inspiring? Well, let us find out. It begins with a man named Temujin, who in a matter of 3 decades is able to unite the different tribes of Mongolia. And for the first time in the history of known civilization, these tribes unite under one banner, under his banner. And he becomes the Khan of all Khans, known as Genghis Khan. His actual name is Temujin. So weak initially, and so poor that he would eat mice, and so weak and helpless that when a neighboring tribe, before he became Khan of all Khans, had abducted, kidnapped his wife, he was helpless and could not bring her back. He unites all the tribes of Mongolia, barbaric, uncivilized, having no religion except for superstitions, having no culture, having no language which they could record or read or write. But what is even more surprising is that he not only unites the tribes of Mongolia, but he goes on a rampage, on a conquest, on a killing spree, and forms the largest land empire known to mankind. How does it begin? It begins with a simple incident, and historians write that if it was not for this incident, he would have probably never embarked outside of the borders of Mongolia. What was that incident? His neighboring country, Muslim nation, empire was the 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙏𝘾𝙏 Empire. And there was a trade dispute between 𝘾𝙊𝙉 and Genghis Khan people. So Genghis Khan, he sends some ambassadors to 𝘾𝙊𝙉 to settle the dispute. And when those ambassadors of Genghis Khan come into the court of 𝘾𝙊𝙉, instead of treating them what the protocol demanded, which is to give them diplomatic immunity and safeguard their life, he kills the ambassadors of Genghis Khan. That how dare you confront a civilized empire like ours, and sends their heads back in a basket. This goes against the teachings of Islam to treat ambassadors in such a way. Genghis Khan then decides to mobilize his war machine. And then, as they say, we know what happens. 𝘾𝙊𝙉, his empire is disposed of. And these are the immediate Caucasus: Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. And Genghis Khan, at one point, he enters Bukhara, Samarkand, Tashkent, Nisapur. And he enters Bukhara, the birthplace and the grave of Imam Bukhari, rahmatullah alayh, and goes on the mimbar and says, "You Muslims must have done something very evil, for your God has appointed a person like me to punish you." And the ways of the Muslims have indeed deviated. from the right path. They had fallen into luxury and sin and temptation. But Genghis Khan, what he did is he invented the word terror. He would terrorize the whole population. If you confronted him, if you took on him, if you challenged him, if you decided to fight against him, and he won, and he always won, then he would not leave a single inhabitant alive. Neither cat, nor dog, nor cattle, nor horse, nor male or female or child of that city would be left alive. And he would make pyramids out of skulls. But this was a terror policy. The reason why he did this was he would let a few people, let them live, so they could go to the next neighboring city and town and spread the news of how terrifying it was. But if you did not challenge him, then he left you intact. You came under his submission, and he left you as you were. Masajid became horse stables for them. And they despised Muslims probably more than the lowest animal. Someone called the Palestinians human animals. They considered the Muslims worse than animals. But as fate would have it, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ, Genghis Khan had 4 sons, Jochi, Chugtai, Uktai, and Halaku. Jogi, Uktai, Chugtai, and Tulai. And Jochi was the eldest. Jochi's son is Birka Khan. So Birka Khan is the grandson of Genghis Khan. Birka Khan accepts Islam. Yes. وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ. Who would have thought that the grandson of Genghis Khan would accept Islam? And then when Genghis Khan died and the kingdom was divided into 4, for the 4 sons, imagine ruling all the way from China, all the way up, including Mongolia and Russia, Siberia, Poland, all the Caucasus, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, down to the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Damascus, Iran, Turkey, all of this area, Asia Minor, all of this fell under the Khans. And divided into 4 kingdoms. On the other hand, you had Tulai, the youngest. This was Birka Khan, the grandson from the oldest son. You had Tulai, the youngest. Tulai's son was Halaku Khan. Halaku Khan and his brother Mungo Khan, they hated Muslims probably more than any other Khan. And they decided to finish off the job that their grandfather had started, which is to exterminate any living Muslim alive on this planet. You can imagine how the Muslim Ummah was and how they were feeling at that time. There was no army that could take them on. The swords had rusted. The Muslims had fell into luxury. So what happens? Allah raises this grandson, Birka Khan. Birka Khan, when Halaku Khan, the grandson from Tulai Khan, decides to attack Baghdad, because Baghdad is now the last, or should I say, the most important Islamic empire. An empire, the Abbasis, that had lasted for 600 years. And he raises an army, Halaku Khan and Mungo Khan, the largest army that the Mongolians had raised to this date, which is 10% of their fighting force. And they go with the intentions of sacking Baghdad, and they do sack Baghdad, and we know what happens in 1258, the sack of Baghdad. When it came to how to dispose of the Khalifa, because they were people who believed in superstition, They believed that if the blood of the Khalifa fell on the ground, then it would bring the punishment of God, the wrath of God. So they devised a way of killing the Khalifa, Khalifa 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙏𝘼𝘾𝙏, without his blood touching the ground. They wrapped him in a rug and ran their horses over him. And that was the end of the Abbasids. The rivers in Baghdad were of two colors, red or black. First, you have to understand Baghdad before you understand what happened to the rivers in Baghdad. Baghdad was a city of 1 million strong, while London at the same time was a city of 10,000. Not a single library, public library in London. And Baghdad had dozens of libraries that housed hundreds of thousands of books. But when they ransacked Baghdad, they dumped all those books into the river, into the Euphrates River. That's why the river turned black with the color of ink, or it turned yet red with the color of blood, because all 800,000 plus inhabitants of Baghdad were put to the sword. 800,000 Muslims in 3 days. That was the sack of Baghdad. And now their attention was on Egypt, the Mamluk dynasty, and that was the last of the Muslim dynasties. What could they do? But Allah Azza wa Jal puts Birka Khan in front of Halaku Khan, because they are first cousins. Halaku Khan's grandfather, Genghis Khan. Birka Khan's grandfather, Genghis Khan. Birka Khan stands up and says to Halaku that you have killed the Khalifa of the Muslims. You have ransacked Baghdad. Now I stand between you and Egypt, Cairo, Mamluk dynasty. You will have to go through me if you want to attack Egypt. And Halaku Khan says, don't you remember the law of Yasa, the law of our grandfather Genghis Khan, that no Mongol will raise a sword against another Mongol? This is what Halaku Khan says. Birka Khan says, Genghis Khan was a kafir. You are a kafir, and I am a believer. You will have to go through me. But anyhow, as it happens, Halaku Khan did what he did in 1258. But Halaku Khan's grandson also accepts Islam. Yes, and names himself Ahmad Khan. As a matter of fact, out of the 4 sons of Genghis Khan, Jogi, 𝘾𝙁𝙊𝙉𝙏𝘼𝘾𝙏, 𝘾𝙁𝙁, 𝘾𝙁, the descendants of 3 of them, accept Islam. And this is the first time, and first and only time in history, where the conquerors accepted the religion of the people they conquered. This never happens. The conquered, they accept the religion of the conqueror. But here what happens is that the conquerors, the victors, they accepted the religion of the people they conquered. They were the Fatih of Muslims, but they became the Maftuh of Islam. They conquered Muslims, but Islam conquered them. And that is why those hands that held swords dripping with the blood of Muslims, those same hands were holding tasbihs. Yes. Many lessons, many lessons. That's why I said this is the darkest chapter in the history of Islam, but it's also the most inspiring. What happened? Even Christian historians are mystified that why did they accept Islam? They could have accepted Christianity. There were Christian missionaries who were at work wanting them to accept Christianity. They could have accepted the Buddhist faith. Actually, the descendants of one of them accepted the Buddhist faith, 𝘾𝙁𝙁𝙁. But Jogi, 𝘾𝙁𝙁𝙁𝙁, and 𝘾𝙁, their descendants accepted Islam. Yes. You have Birka Khan's grandson, Uzbek. That's where you get Uzbekistan. Yes, accepted Islam. 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙒 descendants, Babar is from the descendants of 𝘾𝙊𝙉 Khan. Yes, who formed the Mughal dynasty. Mughal is a Persian form of Mongol. And how Allah Azza wa Jal used them now to spread Islam. And that is exactly what Islam needed. A breath of fresh air, fresh blood, new blood. Because the old blood had become tainted with sin and temptation. So Allah brought another nation. How did it happen? The historians again, Christian historians, they say, oh, it was probably proximity. That's the only explanation we have. Proximity, in other words, Muslims were the closest to them. Because the brunt of the Mongol invasion was bared by the Muslims. Yes, they did attack Russia and China and other areas of the world, but the brunt of the devastation occurred, and the majority of the lands that they occupied were Muslim lands. So proximity. But what was that proximity? It was that interaction. I'm giving proximity another angle. It was that interaction that they had with Muslims because of the proximity to Muslims. That one-on-one da'wah, that one-on-one interaction. Yes, as I said, the swords of Muslims had rusted. There was no possibility of Muslims taking on the Mongols in terms of physical strength and power. But what happened is that slowly, gradually, one by one, Tatars accepted Islam. Sometimes a commander accepted Islam. And that's what happened in the case of Birka Khan. One of his commanders accepted Islam, and he presented Islam to Birka. What happened in the case of 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙒 Khan, one of his descendants, a Tatar prince. He was on a hunting trip, and he saw a Muslim, a Sufi saint, by the name of Jalaluddin. And he told Jalaluddin, are you better, or is my dog better, my hunting dog? He was upset, this Tatar prince, because seeing a Muslim on a hunting trip was bad omen. Seeing a Muslim was bad omen. That meant he wasn't going to catch anything. So he wanted to kill this Jalaluddin. So Jalaluddin answered, I cannot answer this question at this moment. He said, why? He said, if I die with Iman, then I am better than your dog. And if I die without Iman, then your dog is better than me. Then this Tatar prince asks Jalaluddin, what is Iman? And this explanation was not the explanation of any Maulvi or any preacher. It was the explanation of a Waliullah. What is Iman? So this Tatar prince, he says, okay, I want to accept. But I'm only a prince, I'm not yet the in charge. When I assume the throne, then come to me. So he comes. But before he assumes the throne, Jalaluddin, he's on his deathbed. So Jalaluddin calls his son Rashiduddin and tells Rashiduddin that it looks like the good fortune of giving Shahada to this Tatar is your fortune, because I'm on my deathbed. But when he assumes the throne, remind him of his promise. So when this Tatar, the descendant of 𝘾𝙊𝙉𝙒, assumes the throne, Rashiduddin knocks on his palace door and says, my father was better than your dog. He died with Iman. And then he, of course, fulfills his promise. That is how Islam spread. Yes, that is how Islam spread. That's why Allama Iqbal, he says, Pasban mil gaye Kaaba ko sanam khane se. The custodians, Kaaba found its custodians. Kaaba found its custodians from the house of idols. Yes, they became the guardians of Islam. Who? The descendants of Genghis Khan. Yes, this is the beauty of Islam. No force, no bribery, no wealth. Falsehood, batil, is spread using four things. Zor, zameen, zar, zan. Sounds nice in Urdu because they all start with the letter Z. Zor, force. Batil spreads through force, through land, through woman, and through wealth. Haqq does not spread through any one of these four. Haqq does not require wealth, nor force, nor land, nor woman. Haqq spreads on its own merit, on its own truth, on the magnetism, on the magnetic power and the simplicity of Islam. May Allah Azza wa Jal show us that day where Islam spreads, وَيَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا, and people come into Islam in crowds.